Majin Buu Saga, a team that seemingly appeared out of nowhere and completely controlled Dragon Ball Legends for a long period of time. But what if I told you this was a long-term plan built by the Dragon Ball Legends devs, and since it came into fruition, it's only caused nothing but problems? Okay, my name's Zakashi, guys, and in this video here, we're gonna be discussing why Majin Buu Saga is the biggest problem in Dragon Ball Legends, at least currently. We're in the festival right now, 2024, we've got the future units, but it doesn't seem like they're that all powerful to the point where everybody's being forced to use them. This is quite unlikely for festival units. If we compare last year, the meta immediately shifted. We went from Universe Rep and Ultra Vegeta Blue being the only units you could use into immediately Evo Ken Universe Rep, plus hybrids slash movies with Beast Gohan. Not to say Vegeta Blue isn't being used, but I'm sure a lot of us can see Rose is not the contender we thought he would be. But I'm sure at least before the festival, if not still now, especially in Proud Battle, Majin Buu Saga is a major problem, and that's what we're going to be discussing in this video. Now, it does go without saying that this Majin Buu Saga team is very powerful. It's not something that needs to be really discussed. We all know the reasons why. I'm not going to touch on them right now, but before we go into why they're so powerful and where the problem actually lies, we need to address their failures, because this isn't something they achieved in one go. Yes, it happened very fast, but they were trying for a long time to at least set the pieces in place to then buff Majin Buu Saga when the time was right. There are some units that already exist in the game, and I'm going to touch on them very quickly. First, let's start with Tien. Everybody saw Tien's mechanic and thought it was going to be the most relevant thing in the game. This was a major moment in Dragon Ball Legends where everybody looked at it and was like, whoa, he can just stop rising rushes. Everybody's going to be using him on his team. But then it became that he wasn't so amazing. Shout out to our GOAT Tien Shinhan. We love you, but of course, the developers fumbled you. The main reason his mechanic isn't great is because it only works for your other allies. So if he's getting Rise and Rushed, it won't activate because he obviously can't save himself. And outside of that, if the enemy already has one person already dead, then his Rise and Rush counter will not activate. So it's only something that really works early game, and the rest of his kit isn't relevant enough, especially at that time, and even more so right now. He's only getting worse to be used just for that mechanic. But we did see later in the future, they basically improved on it and they dropped Gold Frieza, who's literally just 100 times better than him. It's not even close. There was no point of even releasing him if they're just going to drop Gold Frieza, who has his mechanic just done better. Plus, we all are aware Gold Frieza's kit is actually amazing, so there's so many reasons to use them outside of their Rise and Rush mechanic counter. We've got Boo Bros with their prep time gauge. When they originally released in 2023, nobody was really feeling them. Yes, they did look cool, and yes, the prep time is amazing to see, but it takes a lot of work and it's not the easiest to land anyways, and especially at that time, it did no damage. When they dropped them, they were pretty much useless on release. People used them because they liked them. Some people tried to hype them up. I don't know why, but they just wasn't that relevant. And even now that they have a Zenkai, they're a good option, but they're not the best option, and nobody went out their way to use them. Again, it takes a lot of effort to get to their biggest attack. It's only a one-time thing, and there's just better options over them. So I'm putting them under a failure as well. We've got this free-to-play Super Saiyan 3 Goku. I don't really have anything to say about him. It's just free-to-plays mostly suck. We've got the World Champion Hercule too. He's something that's been in the game for a minute, so I'm not going to count him for the Buu Saga buffs in a sense. But what's good to know is that this guy was very impactful maybe 2-3 years ago. And since his impact of people noticing how valuable he can be in a PvP game, talking to the point where you can just bring 2 characters and then Hercule as your third, and because he's going to hit you with a paralyze and a lock-in, you're going to win the game if those 2 characters are OP. Shout out Ultra Super Gogeta, my guy. But going forward, they basically gave a lot of units immunity to these effects or buff cancellations, so they can just avoid the paralyze. Plus, a lot of units have these buff cancellations, endurance, so even if you are able to do major damage, you're not going to take them out quickly. There will be a very high chance of them surviving even if you bring Hercule, so bringing him now is more of a liability than it was a plus back then when the power creep wasn't as high as it is right now. And then for the final thing, I think a lot of people really wanted this. They missed out on the Angel Vegeta Zenkai, the yellow one. If you guys are OG players, you guys will love this unit. He was super tanky, easily a top 3-5 unit early game, but of course they didn't go ahead and Zenkai him. Missed opportunity for a peak Zenkai in the peak of Majin Buu Saga, because we know this team isn't going to come back, but maybe they're going to do his Zenkai during a Saiyan Z ability buff, who knows. But maybe I'm kind of glad they didn't buff him, because we did get a lot of yellows during this period anyways, specifically Ultra Majin Vegeta. Now let's spin back to the 6th anniversary and find the problem. I'd say this is the real source of Majin Buu Saga being an absolute menace to society. In the part 1 of the 6th anniversary, history, we're only focusing on one side because only one side was Majin Buu Saga, but a lot of people were actually swayed the other way because it's a fusion warrior. We got fusing Super Vegeta. When you see a Vegito, most people don't actually think of the saga they're from first. I'm pretty sure everybody would acknowledge the saga they're from, but we're speaking Dragon Ball Legends terms. You look at the tag and the tag is fusion warrior, and especially because Majin Buu Saga has never been a super relevant team. It's really a saga, so we haven't gone into a bunch of Z abilities until recently for a lot of sagas. It's very weird when they do that because the tags make sense, but when you have the episode as a Z ability, it's like, okay, you're really trying to box us in here, and they've never done that since the start of the game, consistently anyways. It's kind of random for them to start now. So people looked at Majin Buu Saga as a joke. You're looking at fusion warriors, and then Shin, people are mostly thinking he could be relevant on God Key, or you can use him for breaking combos disruption on a leader slot option. Both of them were really good, but the main thing about fusing Super Vegeta is that his rising rush mechanic allows him to get wins no matter what. Especially at that time, survivability wasn't as relevant as it was right now. It's only getting worse if we're being honest, but when he rising rushes, even if you pick him, he's gonna instant transmission behind you and he's gonna land that attack. You're gonna get taken out while he's on the boost as well. It doesn't matter if you're type advantage or not, and even then if you cover change when he's rising rushing, he goes type neutral, so the hit's gonna be guaranteed to kill. Fusing Super Vegeta is a genuine problem, and I'd say he's the very core of what they decided to do, but it's also quite contradicting for the tag itself because the units that came out to stop him are the same units that are also on his team, but you could argue that's mainly because we see him as a fusion warrior, and the devs definitely do first as well because they know how relevant fusion warriors are every single celebration. But don't ignore Shin. Shin is a sneaky guy. That guy is there to be a problem as well. He doesn't shine as much, but when he's on people's teams, he's helping out a lot. Let's also bring in the fact that fusing Super Vegeta is blue. That's going to be relevant coming up in the future. Now we're heading into part 2, and again we're focused on only one side. In part 1 we had movies and Majin Buu Saga, even though it just looked like two fusion warriors to start with. In part 2 they hit us with a stray. We wasn't expecting this. We got Ultimate Gohan and Evil Majin Buu. The other side movies, but we're not focused on it. Now for no reason, every time they drop a Gohan, why is he always busted? If it's a premium Gohan, he's gonna be the most cracked thing we've seen. It's like they do it on purpose to piss us off, or they're quite money hungry, which is most likely the scenario. With the release of Ultimate Gohan and Evil Majin Buu, this is the beginning of them trying to fix a problem they created. With fusing Super Vegeta, because he rising rushes, it was very evident that he's the most toxic unit in the game. I wouldn't say his kit overall is toxic, but the mechanic itself, it's easily the best mechanic in the game that we'll ever see. You shouldn't be allowed to win a rising rush no matter what, especially since rising rushes will never be removed pretty much. It's been a mechanic since the start of the game. Plus he gets nullification of endurance on top of his rising rush. He's gonna be at the top of the game without a doubt. So with Ultimate Gohan and Evil Majin Buu's design, it was very evident that they're going out their way to cancel buffs, and one of those buffs that get cancelled is the nullification of endurance, which fusing Super Vegeta has. That makes him less dominant on the battlefield because even if he does get the rising rush off, if somebody has endurance and you start in with Evil Majin Buu or Ultimate Gohan and the rising rush gets pressed, the nullification of endurance will get cancelled. Even if the rising rush goes through and then that person switches out to somebody that has endurance, only their endurance will get taken out and they will not die. That allows teams to survive excessively, specifically Majin Buu Saga or any team you would run Ultimate Gohan on or Evil Majin Buu, which led to also two other teams gaining major benefits from this, which would be powerful opponents and Hybrid Saiyans. Now Hybrid Saiyans didn't flare as much, but people definitely went out their way to bring out Ultra Super Saiyan 2 Gohan again, and of course people can't let go of Red Beast, so people are running him too. They also did drop a purple Goten, maybe a bit later though, but he's a free to play, so let's not even discussing that much. But the powerful opponent end was dangerous, especially with the addition of Zenkai Kid Buu. Zenkai Kid Buu, for no reason, they also gave him endurance. Fair enough, he doesn't cancel buffs, but on Majin Buu Saga, he's already got two other units that do. You put Ultimate Gohan in the leader slot, you run Evil Majin Buu, then you have Zenkai Kid Buu. That's two endurance units and two units that can cancel buffs, so in all cases, you're only gonna have a 1 in 3 chance of getting Rising Rush by fusing Super Vegeta and have him actually take somebody out. It's very rare to happen unless you literally just make the mistake of forgetting that he's gonna Rising Rush you, which would be a pretty silly mistake if you did. But it happens, just rarely. Ultimately, one of two units were going to be your #1 unit during that part 2. You will take Ultimate Gohan because his obvious dominance. He was easily by far the best unit in the game from an individual point of view, or you could have fusing Super Vegeta. The Rising Rush, no matter how dominant somebody else is, it can still take out a whole bar of health, and if not, it's going to take you out, especially if you Rising Rush that one person. So in this case, we was talking about Majin Buu Saga. If it's going to be Zenkai Kid Buu, he doesn't nullify buff, so you rush him. If they switch out to Evil Buu, you get the type neutral. If they switch out to Ultimate Gohan, you don't don't need the type neutral, and then they're both gonna die because they wasn't in to cancel your buffs. Personally, I would lead more to Ultimate Gohan because the 1 in 3 chance isn't major enough, but I could easily see why somebody would take fusing Super Vegito. It's not something I'm going to argue on though. And within this period of time, just to put the icing on the cake, Free-to-Play 18 was a unit that existed that was going out her way to actually buff the team, Majin Buu Saga. She was a good tanky unit, and the god rankers, I'm talking the top 50 god rankers in the world, the top 50 players in the world, were actually using Free-to-Play 18 as a genuine strategy and clearing the rest of the game. Some of you guys might not believe that, but it was the case. They'd be running her alongside Ultimate Gohan and Evil Majin Buu, and honestly that team was too tanky while having insane offensive power. It was a real problem. I didn't really talk much on Ultimate Gohan, I just said he has a lot of individual power because I just assume everybody knows. But if we want to glide through him quickly, he has like unlimited green cards, unlimited blue cards. He's able to nullify endurance off blue and ultimate. He can take away your vanish off the main ability. He has the buff cancellations and of course endurance, so he's just the full package. And his element was purple, and the only person to counter him at that time was fusing Gogeta blue, and we know about that guy, man. That guy wasn't that great. Now after the anniversary, I'm sure we really thought it was going to be over. They're done with buffing Majin Buu Saga. We got a lot out of them, man. Ultimate Gohan, Evil Majin Buu, fusing Super Vegeta and Shin. That was very excessive, all of those 4, but we got all of them right. We can put the fries in the bag now. You guys are still the best team in the game, and you shouldn't even get any more units. But of course, the developers, slow moment here for them in my opinion, they decide to drop another Majin Buu Saga unit, that being Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks. Why? Dropping a Gotenks is fine. I think it was actually a calm decision. Right before the festival, he's not that hyped to a lot of people. Me personally, he's super entertaining, so I was going to summon for him even if his kit was trash, but he ended up actually being a problem in PvP for 2 reasons. 1, he actually has very good combos. His combo potential is really high, so he's able to cook people. He gets cover null pretty easily, and he can actually do a lot of damage that way. And then 2, just like a lot of the other Majin Buu Saga units, they just decided to give him endurance. Fair enough, he doesn't cancel buffs, but they gave him endurance. Because they gave him endurance, it just means he can be paired with the other Majin Buu Saga units, and they're pretty much giving them a full color wheel of overpowered units, man. We already have 2 units that cancel buffs, one that has an immediate rise and rush. Buu Bro's got a Zenkai. Kid Buu, he does insane blast damage, one of the highest blast damage in the game at that time, while also having endurance. Then they add a Red, who also has endurance, plus one of the longest combos in the game at the time. At this point, it's super obsessive. I guess that was the best way to make him valuable and relevant, but I think it's very apparent that they very much feared the mechanics that they brought out in the 6th anniversary, specifically the likes of fusing Super Vegito and Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. Now, I didn't mention him earlier because this video is about Majin Buu Saga. Ultra Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, his presence needs to be studied. Came out in the 6th anniversary with the most nuclear ultimate we've ever seen, highest damage power, the counter of death, heaven and above, while having an explosive green that literally locks you in. This guy was a menace, and of course the devs have gone really hardcore in trying to counter him, but it just doesn't help that they're super buffing one team to deal with that team, Fusion Warriors, and then going even beyond excessive to make sure that Majin Buu Saga is really the ultimate team. At this time, if you play Proud Battle, 9 out of 10 of your games will be Majin Buu Saga-esque. It will either be a whole Majin Buu Saga team, or they'll lead a slot G4 with Majin Buu Saga, or they'll lead us somebody else and put Majin Buu Saga. It doesn't matter what you was doing in Proud Battle because that team is 3v3, and Majin Buu Saga doesn't run off Zenkai buffs. It's one of the purest tags that doesn't rely on Zenkai buffs, so if you're using it, the pure Z abilities are enough to slam you, and that says a lot. If you want to run Fusion Warriors, you're going to need the Zenkai buffs, and the Zenkai buffs are just about matching Majin Buu Saga at a base level. To have that already, and then already have all the endurance factors and buff cancellations, it was really a lot to handle, to the point I'd say it's only anything but good. Now, if you thought the devs were done, they said another one, Ultra Majin Vegeta. Again, I'm not too mad at the unit option. I think it's a very good bait pre-festival, but you need to consider what the meta is looking like for this to be a good release. The unit decision is fine, but then we have to address his kit, and this is one of the most broken ultras we've seen, especially with his team backing him. That doesn't help in the first place. For them to make Vegeta finally get his justice in a way where he's literally being breastfed on top is absolutely absurd. This yellow unit here coming with that blast counter, they've also given him buff cancellations on big attacks, and he's also a possessor of, let's guess here, do you think A, endurance, endurance, B, endurance, C, endurance, or D, not endurance. Well, if you guessed D, there's something mentally wrong with you. They obviously gave him endurance. And at this point, he could have had everything else but the endurance and he would have been more bearable. But the fact that you have to get through 2 lives on top of his counters, which you can barely use blast anyways, is just absurd. I don't have much more to say on this guy. It's an ultra banner, man. The character's gonna be busted. They should make their ultras busted. But it's the fact that the team has already so many layers to it and they just add this on top, it's caused such a huge rift in this game. Now, so far in the video, I've only addressed the main core problems with Majin Buu Saga, so I touched on all the units they've released up until the festival now, which they're no longer releasing Majin Buu Saga units this year, I hope. But what I didn't mention in this video was the meta in general. There's a lot of other units that dropped in between all those units that I mentioned, specifically the likes of Triku, Ultra Turles, and Omega Shenron. There are some others, but they're not relevant, unfortunately. Let's start with Omega Shenron. So Omega Shenron dropping after Ultra Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, everybody thought Omega Shenron would be bad because he's green. Even having Indestructible, G4 was insane. But what we failed to realize is that Majin Buu Saga is an incredible counter towards G4. They could fight on an equal playing field, but the team is ultimately better, and G4 is only one unit. Adding Omega Shenron with Indestructible, having that buff cancellation is going to be super valuable against the likes of G4's ultimate. Not just that, but fusing Super Vegeta too. So Majin Buu Saga started splitting into factions. Like I mentioned earlier, powerful opponent became very big. With Omega Shenron, you now have Evil Majin Buu who cancels buffs, Zenkai Kid Buu, who's also a range type by the way, who has endurance, and then you got Omega Shenron, who's also a range type. He has a long range ultimate, allowing you to build a good powerful opponent team with insane survivability factors. The elements don't matter that much when you're able to cancel buffs, go type neutral defensively. You can work around it, and the team was actually that good that it could actually just work. That's only an example of some of the units that existed. Corrupted Zamasu was also hanging around, so if you wanted to bring a red, you definitely could. And then of course, goes without saying, the leader slot does exist. So initially Omega Shenron's release, it was like, okay, this shouldn't be anything. Pretty dumb decision. But it ended up being one of the best decisions for powerful opponents, leading powerful opponents to become a top 3 team. At that time, you're either running Fusion Warriors, sticking to your powerhouses, you're running Majin Buu Saga, just being an absolute menace with your cancelling buffs and survivability, or you're running pure defense with blast attack on powerful opponents. Those 3 teams were a major problem. But if we move forward just slightly, when we had the Ultra Turles release, and they dropped Ultra Turles really close to Ultra Majin Vegeta, we also had Triku release. So we had 2 Tree of Might movie releases, and they both synergized amazingly together. With the release of Ultra Majin Vegeta, again like before, the team started splitting into factions. So now we've got a Saiyan team running the game right before the festival, which would be yellow, blue. Ultra Turles with his comeback, Triku, which is the best counter towards G4. He just completely shuts him down. And with Turles protecting Triku, you don't have to worry about Triku getting nuked because he doesn't have any endurance or anything like that. His kit is just a pure design to shut down G4. And then the third release, Ultra Majin Vegeta, seriously excessive, adding that extra layer of buff cancellation and endurance. They really went the full mile to make sure that G4 and the anniversary units, besides the Majin Buu Saga lots, really just got out of the way. It should go without saying everybody saw how toxic it was before the festival started. Not to say it was the worst period we've ever had in Dragon Ball Legends history, but it's nowhere near one of the best. And then to add insult to injury, the festival isn't even popping like that, so the game's feeling very slow paced for a lot of people. Now to address the actual problem, Majin Buu Saga as a whole. There were 3 major points that I could deduce as to why Majin Buu Saga is such a major problem, and I'm going to give them to you right now. The first one is survivability. Survivability entails anything that allows you to stay alive. The main ones that I want to point out are endurance, comeback, indestructible, healing, and disruption. There are some other things that you could count as well for survivability, such as counters, but there's ways to get around that. For example, unless you're Gold Frieza, you're not countering a Rising Rush, you're still going to get slammed. But the survivability will allow you to redeem yourself. Too many Majin Buu Saga units have this, and that leads them to be the strongest team even if the player is the worst. They're going to continuously survive with the tiniest bit of competence where you can just continuously switch out and bank on your units being able to absorb hits, whereas most other teams, they don't have the benefit of consistently healing, consistently surviving big attacks, and disrupting combos. As a result, you have to play at least 3 times better than anybody using Majin Buu Saga if you're not using Majin Buu Saga to come out on top. The second thing, buff cancellation. It'd be alright if if they had survivability and you had an opportunity to get through them. For example, with your Rising Rush, that's meant to be a super attack. But when they cancel your buffs, you lose the opportunity to nullify their endurance. Without that opportunity, you're playing the rawest possible game that you could. There's no mechanic that you can use to overcome them unless you're using a unit that permanently nullifies endurance, which there weren't at the time. You'd have to really force your way through with sheer consistency and power, or catch one of their units lacking. For example, I mentioned Kid Buu. He doesn't have buff cancellation, so you can Rising Rush him with Fusing Super Vegeta, but even Fusing Super Vegeta is on the same team as him, so that's crazy scenes. And then the third one, it's power creep. If they had the first thing, survivability, it's annoying as hell, but at least you can work around it if they didn't cancel buffs. But then they cancel buffs on top, so now they can survive, and they're gonna stop you from using anything overpowered to get through them. And then on top of that, power creep, they're the most recent units in the game. They're gonna have the most recent kits, the freshest kits, with the newest mechanics and the highest damage. While being on the featured boost, you're completely getting suffocated here. So much so that all of the units can also branch out on every other team, making the core still Majin Buu Saga. It's nasty work. You can't build against them because they're everywhere, so you have to join them in some way, shape or form. But ultimately, not everybody wants a Majin Buu Saga unit. So for this period, they just became a problem, and it's gonna affect the future too. Now for these points, I didn't mention some of the things I obviously brought up. For example, indestructible comeback are not evident on any Majin Buu Saga unit, but that's because the team merges with other teams because of the leader slot option, which should go without saying. In conclusion, because of these three main issues that I've brought up, Majin Buu Saga is going to be something that is going to be hard to overcome. Power creep might get them because every other unit that drops is meant to be overpowered, but as we've seen with these festival headliners, Rose isn't making as big as an impact as we thought, and Vegeta Blue, yes, he is insane, but again, just like the G4 situation, he's only one unit. And what makes things worse is that going forward, the only way to counter these units is to either make units that are more overpowered than them, which is even worse because then we'll have another problem on our hands. So power creep is just going to accelerate at 5 times the rate, or we're forced to suffer for a long period of time, stomaching the stress that Majin Buu Saga brings. We're in the festival right now and people are still running Majin Buu Saga. Fair enough, you might see other teams because people are enjoying the festival. G4 is still very much used. I think he hit top 6 units for the Ultra Majin Vegeta season, which is insane. But especially at the highest ranks, they're always going to use the best strategy that there is to win. And I see for at least the next 6 months, it's going to revolve around Majin Buu Saga. Unless the developers try to counter them, like I said, it will just be power creep at 5 times accelerated rate. One unit that can take out all the survivability factors, everybody will just switch sides. We're going from one boat to another, and it should go without saying why that's a major issue. That's going to be the end of the video, man. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. This is a topic I wanted to discuss for a while. I'm happy I did. Let me know you guys' thoughts about it in the comment section, and don't forget to hit that like button, show some support to the channel. I'm a big hater of survivability. I'd rather lose the game in 2 minutes by ultimate attack and big nukes rather than play 8 minutes, stretch out the game, and just get the same points that I would have if I lost in 2 minutes. It just doesn't feel good to stretch out a game and to lose. Obviously, it doesn't feel good to lose anyways, but when everybody's playing a fast-paced game, I really think it's more enjoyable. But that's just my opinion. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you haven't already, make sure to press the subscribe button. We're on this grind to 200,000 subscribers. I appreciate you guys for watching, man. My name is Zakashi, guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one, man.